All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about nouns and adjectives with respect to gender. Okay, now when I say gender, okay, what do I mean? Like if I were to say that in the modern context, what is gender? What does that refer to? What does that refer to? Hands, don't just shout out. Arwen.
How people feel.
How people feel with respect to?
Like sex?
Yeah, with respect to not orientation, sex, that's the word. Yeah, okay. But with Latin, though, it's a little bit different, okay? It's not going to take that modern view, so don't try to apply that, okay? Just kind of as a warning. All right. So some basic jargon or basic words that you should be aware of. Okay, there are 4 of them. All right, noun, adjective, modify, and gender. Okay, please write these definitions down in your books. Okay, so that you have them. We're going to be using these words frequently and interchangeably. You need to know these definitions. Okay. And if you need, I can maybe zoom in a little bit. All right, so noun is something that you should be familiar with already. Okay, a person, place, thing, or idea. An adjective, you should also know. It's a word that modifies or describes a noun. Okay, now, I used that word just now, modify. Has anyone heard that term before? Okay, all right. Modify just simply means, it indicates that there's a relationship between 2 words. Okay, it provides more information about a noun, or restricts it, meaning like it, gives a limitation of some kind. Okay, but nouns and adjectives do go together. Just like verbs go with adverbs.
The adverbs not only go with verbs.
That's true. And in English, adverbs don't just go with verbs. They do sometimes modify adjectives. Right?
Do that in Latin, the adverb only modify verbs.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like sometimes English and Latin don't exactly line up. This is one of those instances. All right. In Latin, typically nouns go with adjectives, verbs go with adverbs. Right. And there's really no mixing of those 2. Right. But in English, there is. Okay. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is gender. Okay, it's a characteristic that in Latin only applies to nouns and adjectives. All right, and there are 3 of them. Okay, there's masculine, there's feminine, and there is neuter. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, does anyone in here speak a language that has nouns with gender? Kind of. Eh?
So when you write it. I'm not sure when you write it.
You don't see it when you write it?
So you see it when you write it, but when you say it, it's the same thing.
Oh, interesting. Huh. Okay. All right, now let's look at, does everyone get a chance to write this down? Yeah? Right, CC squinting. Which one? Where am I zooming in? There? Is that better? Sort of. Okay. Okay. Now, one thing that should be noted, the gender of a noun does not have to do with the gender of the actual thing. Okay, have you heard me say that before?
Is it like aqua?
It's just like aqua, yeah. So aqua is technically a feminine noun, but water is not a girl. In the same way that the word for chair is selai, right? It's feminine, but a chair is not a girl.
So what maybe they're a chair goddess.
And that, maybe. I mean, but that's kind of that's how those deities eventually developed, right? The ideas of
You
things.
said it's so like, they can modify, but they don't like describe?
They do describe. Adjectives do describe.
How did you say it before? You said they modify, but.
So like I was equating nouns and adjectives to the other side of things where you've got verbs and adverbs. In English, adverbs don't just go with verbs though. In English, adverbs can also modify an adjective. But that's just English. In Latin, it doesn't work that way. In Latin, it's a very strict demarcation. You've got nouns and adjectives, and then over here you've got verbs and adverbs.
Alright.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so now let's keep going. I'm going to there's going to be a sentence on the board. You are going to write this sentence down. Write down the Latin. Put your macrons in. Okay. Now, if I were to mark this up or identify parts of speech here, do we have nouns or adjective? What's going on here? What do we got? Jack?
You have a noun, you have a verb, and you have a linking verb, and you have an adjective.
Good. Oh, sorry, that's a little thin. Let's make that slightly thicker. Okay, so just for now, noun, linking verb. Okay, and this is also a noun. Okay, what's the translation for this? Clinton?
Marcus is a boy.
Marcus is a boy, so please write the translation beneath. Okay, so far so good?
Yeah.
All right. I'm moving on to the next sentence. Y'all ready? Boop. Okay. Please write down the Latin. Marcus est puer Romanus. Okay, this is a pretty simple sentence. You've seen this probably a million bajillion times. Okay. But if we were to identify our parts of speech here, okay, Marcus is still a noun, and est is still a linking verb, so we'll label that. Okay, puer is still a noun. But what about the word Romanus? What is Romanus, Alice? It's an adjective. Okay. All right. Who can give me the translation for this sentence? Translation. Amy, how about you? Marcus is a Roman boy. Good. All right, so write that underneath, please. Okay, now, can someone describe the relationship between the word Tiffany Jin? Can someone describe the relationship between Romanus and puer? Describe the relationship using the jargon, using the specialized words we just learned. Monty.
Romanus is an adjective describing the noun.
Good. Okay, so he said, just to reiterate, Romanus is an adjective describing the noun puer. Now, we're going to switch that word describing with another word. What word? Modifying, right? So the word Romanus is modifying the word puer. Could you also argue that Romanus is modifying Marcus as well?
Yeah.
Yes, because, right, you've got Marcus and puer connected by a linking verb, talking about the same dude, right? So both Marcus and the boy, same guy, everything is Roman. We're all Roman in that sentence. Okay.
No, I'm a barbarian.
You are a barbarous. Barbaros.
Barbar.
Clinton es puer barbaros.
Barbar.
Okay, any questions so far, or does this kind of make sense? As Claire stares out the window, thinking about her life choices. Next, please write this down. Cornelia est puella. This is another sentence that hopefully you've seen a bajillion times, but it never gets old, in case you need a reminder. All right, grammatically speaking, parts of speech, what do we got here? What do we have here? Jonathan, how about you?
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Student verb.
What kind of verb? Good. And?
Color is noun.
Good. All right, translation. Jason Q.
Cordelia is a girl.
Cornelia is a girl. Good, so we're just going to write that underneath. Okay. Any questions? Final one. Boop. All right. Cornelia es puella romana. Cornelia es puella romana. Please write that down in your notes. Okay. Now, in terms of parts of speech here, Cornelia is still a noun. Nothing's changed there. Est is still a linking verb. Puella is still a noun. All right, but somebody tell me about romana. What is that part of speech there, Tinjin?
It's an adjective.
It's an adjective. Good. Okay. Translation for this. Jade. Cornelia is a Roman girl. Good. Okay, so we'll just write that underneath. Okay. So how am I going to describe the relationship between the words Romana, Puella, and Cornelia? You can use the jargon, use the specialized words that we learned. Who's feeling gutsy? That's interesting. Okay, sorry.
So, Romana is the adjective which is describing Cornelia.
Good. Okay, so Romana is the adjective, which is describing Cornelia. Okay, so remember, we're switching that word describing with what word, everyone? Everyone? Modify. Okay, so describe, modify. Those are two interchangeable words. All right, I just want to make sure that you kind of rewire your brains to know when I say modify, I'm meaning describing. Okay, modify equals describe. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. You don't have to wear the life vest for that. Because it's out of the building. I feel like that's extra. Okay. May I scroll? We good? We got this? Okay. All right, so there are some takeaways here. All right. Nouns have predetermined gender. Okay, that's just the way that the noun was born. That's the nature of the noun, and it's always going to be that way. Noun genders do not change, ever. Noun genders do not change. Everybody say that. Noun genders do not change. One more time. Noun genders do not change. Question.
What happened to that rule where it was like if it's a group of women, then it's a feminine, and then if one male enters that group, then it becomes masculine? What was that rule?
I don't know that it has a
I think it's like the pronoun thing.
the pronoun thing.
Yeah, like
Well, it could do with like it happens with nouns as well, or adjectives rather. I don't know that there is actually a phrase to describe that, but it does happen in Spanish as well, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, but that's sort of different-ish. Because then it might be a different word.
That's why I got confused. I got confused with it and the nouns are predetermined gender, because those kind of contradict, right?
That's true, they do contradict. So try to forget about that, and when we come across that rule, I can kind of point it out. All right, the second takeaway is that adjectives have the ability to change gender depending on the noun that it's modifying, right? So remember, think back to those sentences that you just wrote down, okay? The word romana ends in an A, and it's modifying another word that also ends in an A, puella and cornelia. Okay, similarly, think back to the other sentence that you wrote, romanus. Okay, now technically it's modifying puer, and puer doesn't end in us, but they do agree. Okay, meaning they match, they go together. They agree in gender. Okay, so if nouns can't change, something has to have the ability to change, and that's what adjectives do.
Right?
Tim
What
Jin?
if like a name doesn't correspond with the, is there like any sort the now, like the name doesn't correspond with the gender?
As far as I'm aware, no.
Like, say that Marcus is Puella Romana. Say that from now on, Marcus is a girl.
That wouldn't happen. So
Marcus is established as the
there are, and this is kind of hard to explain. Let me try and word it this way. So with names in particular, because names are a little weird, right? The name Cornelia, if you were to look it up, the name itself is feminine, right? The name Marcus is masculine. Okay, there are, right, and if you see the pattern, right, it ends in an A, this one ends in a US, and you've kind of seen that already. There are certain names that don't follow this pattern, but the noun gender is actually masculine. So for example, or like whatever the person's name is. So for example, Caesar, right? Caesar is. Okay, he's a dude. The name is masculine. So this is one of those instances where the gender of the dude or the lady has to do kind of with the gender of the word, sort of. But try not to like get trapped into that thinking. Right? Just memorize. Essentially what I'm telling you to do is just memorize the genders of the nouns as you come upon them. Okay, Clinton.
Can I go to the water fountain?
You may. If you wear a preserver of life, just to be safe. Did you just sigh at me?
Yeah. Not feeling well today, this thing.
All right, the third rule is that the gender of a noun does not necessarily mean it is male or female. Okay, so a masculine noun doesn't mean that the thing is a boy. Feminine noun doesn't mean that the thing is a girl. A neuter noun doesn't mean that it's neither. Okay, it's kind of just arbitrary. There's no rhyme or reason as to why. Okay, so what I'd like to do is this. All right, I was going to have you guys look up the words in the glossary. Some of them are not there, though. But let's see if we can figure this out without looking up words. Now, typically when I give you nouns, right, these are nouns, right? These are nouns. What other piece of information do I usually give, Jack?
You give other endings,
Thank you.
The other endings?
like A, Y, like C,
So kind of like this?
yeah,
Okay.
What?
not like the ending, like Aurelii, Aurelii.
Okay, so well, let's talk about that then.
So you have to write all this down?
Yep. All right, so whenever you look up a noun in the glossary of your textbook, usually they'll give you two pieces of information first. They'll give you Aurelia, and then they'll give you another ending here, And then there's another piece of information that they also give. What piece of information is that? Whether it's gender, right? Whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. So based on what we just talked about, the word Aurelia, Aurelii, King Bo, what gender do we think that is? If you had to take a wild, educated guess. Yeah, that's a good guess. Okay, so write that in your notes. That is an F.
Write everything with that.
Write everything. Okay, otherwise it's just going to be F's and N's and N's, and that makes no sense. Yes.
I can't really see it.
Okay, is the font color too?
I think so.
All right, we'll do it this way.
Oh,
Is that better?
yeah.
Okay, number 2. Stola, stoli. Stola, stoli. If we had to guess, right, stola is a type of garment that women would wear in public, right? Do we remember that from Roman clothing when we talked about that? Kind of, sort of, right? So there's a stola. What's the other piece that goes with that? Stola and a, starts with a P.
Right.
Stola and a pa.
Toga.
Nope, toga's for men.
Patoga?
Patoga? No, it's a stola and a pala. Okay, stola and a pala. All right, one is the sheath, like the dress that you wear over your tunic, and the other one is the head covering scarf thing that you would wear. Yeah, it's okay. It'll come up eventually. All right, if I had to guess, what gender would I assign this noun? Tim L., what do you think?
I think it should be,
If you had to guess.
yeah. Feminine?
Feminine, and you're right. If you were to look it up, it is indeed feminine. Okay, let's try another one. Number 3, Dawus Dawi. Okay, it is a dude. It is a dude. Okay? But if we had to assign a gender, what do we think it would be? Remember, the gender doesn't have anything to do with the noun itself, but sometimes it kind of works out that way. Robert, what do we got?
Male?
Masculine. Masculine. So we're going to write an M here. Okay. Number 4, amicus amici. Amicus amici. What gender would we assign that one? Dora, what do you think? Follow the pattern. Right? Just like Dawus, Dawi. This is amicus amici. So what gender would this be? M. Masculine. Good. Okay, number 5. Piscina, piscinai. Okay, now we're following the pattern here. Aurelia, Aurelii. Stola, stolai. Piscina, piscinai. What gender should we assign the word for fish pond, Alice? Feminine, good, right? But the fish pond is not a girl. Just remember that. The fish pond is not a girl. Okay. Genevieve, is this question? Or are you going to get the next one? Okay, I'm going to scroll just a wee bit. Number 6. Okay. Toga, togai. Toga, togai. Now, based on the pattern, Genevieve, what gender? Feminine, exactly. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, even though the toga was reserved for dudes, the noun is feminine, right? So that's why I'm telling you, don't try to associate or rationalize why a noun's gender is the way it is. There's no like uniting factor.
So it's just random?
It's pretty random, arbitrary.
Or is there a god from Toga?
But I don't know. Actually, I don't know if there is a god of togas. That'd be funny. All right, may I scroll to the next column?
Yes.
Okay. All right, number 7, Ramos Rami. Ramos Rami, follow the pattern. All right, what gender does that look like?
Masculine.
It's probably masculine, yeah. And indeed it is. Okay.
Slave.
Tim Jen?
There was a dot in that stuff, so I don't think you should even dot the.
There's a dot in the what?
On the end of the line.
Please, come on, it's after the end.
Oh,
That's fine.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, she
I'm
won't want to see
sorry, I
your
put a dot. Let me erase it. There, is that better? So particular. Interesting. That's good though. That's good for Latin. Meticulous attention to detail is very good. You should try Greek. Okay, number 8. Weirdi. This one doesn't exactly follow a pattern, but if we'd had to take an educated guess, Because edumacated is a word.
Edumacated.
Edumacated.
See, I know.
Jack, what do you got?
Masculine.
Masculine. And indeed, if you were to look it up, it would be masculine. And there you go, Tim Jin, no dot. Just for you. Okay. Yes.
What's the pattern?
There's
Okay.
no pattern.
So there is kind of, sort of. Let me just go back really quickly. Okay, so if you notice,
F.
so Aureli I, feminine. Stole I, feminine. Piskinai, feminine. Now if we're gonna do masculine, it's probably feminine. Yeah. Dawus, dawi is gonna be masculine. Amicus, amiki, also masculine.
And then
Okay.
would be
And then Ramos, Rami is another one. This one is a little weird, weary.
I know, but what would be neuter?
We don't actually have any examples of neuter just yet. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into that. Yeah, I think that's maybe a couple more chapters. Okay, number 9, amika, amikai, gender. Jason Q.
That would be,
Yeah, it's feminine, good. Number 10, sextus, sexti. Tiffany Jin, what do we got?
It's a masculine.
Good, it's masculine. Okay, servus, servi. Servus, servi. Claire.
Masculine.
Good. Okay, and last but not least, palai. Jonathan, what do we got? Feminine, good. Okay, now, quick side note about the word servus, servi. What if the noun was this? Then what would the gender be?
Feminine.
Then it would be feminine, right? Okay, but keep in mind though, these are two separate nouns. They're two separate nouns. So even though they look very similar, right, this one is reserved for dude slaves and this one is reserved for lady slaves.
But isn't
What about
like,
Very good, clear
Yeah, what
difference.
about
but isn't guys,
Aquila?
girls slaves, amika.
You're thinking anquila.
Oh, amika.
Anquila is another word for a female slave. Right, but just, so in the same way like in Spanish, you've got amigo and amiga, right? A male friend or a female friend. Similar thing here, you've got servus, serva, you've got amicus, amica, right? That's the difference between like a dude friend and a lady friend, okay? Not necessarily a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Doesn't have to be romantic, it could just be
It's boy
platonic.
space friend.
Boy space friend, exactly. Different than boy no space friend.
God, you guys love.
Okay. Now, oftentimes, right, what we've noticed is that we've got the word Romana and Puella. The ending usually matches, right?
Yes.
Or Romanus, Ramos, I don't know, the Roman branch. That's kind of weird, but whatever. Okay, the endings on the words usually look the same. But do you think that that's going to change?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked.
I mean, for the Roman branch, you could say the Roman branch in the military.
This is true. This is true. I wonder if that's a different word, actually.
Roman branch of the family.
Roman branch. Yeah, that's true. So maybe it isn't that weird. It just sounded weird at first. Okay, so rather than looking these up, all right, these are some interesting words.
Claymore.
Clamor, we're going to use it in a sentence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write some Latin. You're going to write that also. Okay. Magnus clamor in horto est. Right, that's our first sentence. Magnus clamor in horto est. All right, now, question for you. If we were going to mark up this sentence, how would we do it? Who's like to give me my markup? Who's feeling excitedly interested today? All right, Rob, help me out.
Markup in the ones that we just learned or the ones that
In-
we always use?
The ones that we always use.
Okay.
First things first, what's my verb?
Your what?
What's my verb?
Verb in?
Not in, although it does kind of have a verby. Est. Okay, so est is our regular verb. Now in is going to be my
Yeah, with the prepositional.
prepositional phrase. So in and horta, we're going to circle that. All right, now magnus and clamor. I'm telling you that the word magnus modifies clamor. All right, magnus is your adjective, clamor is your noun. But I can certainly tell what gender that this noun is. I can tell what gender clamor is without having to look it up because magnus is right there. All right, what gender is clamor? If we're using our logic skills based on the patterns that we just saw, what gender is clamor? Sorry? It's masculine, yeah. Okay? And if you were to look it up in the dictionary, this is what you would get. Okay? Clamor, clamoris, right? It doesn't follow the patterns that we just talked about, but the noun itself is masculine. Okay, this is where memorization comes in, but this is also where adjectives become a very useful tool.
Is it translated?
Oh, sure.
Is it the big shout is in the garden?
Yeah, the big shout is in the garden. Yeah, so I'll write the translation underneath. Yeah, the big shout, the great shout.
Wait, how does that make sense? The big shout in the garden?
I mean, in Latin it makes sense. In English it sounds kind of weird. Okay. The big shout. It's better than the big sad. Yeah, what's that?
If it was magna, clamor, would clamor change or would like a gender change? I don't know.
Okay, good question. So what he's asking is, can we write this? Is this grammatically correct? Magna clamor in horto est. No, you cannot do it, right? Because by nature, clamor is a noun, and what do we know about nouns? Do nouns ever change? Yeah, nouns cannot change gender, ever, ever, ever. It's just, it's stuff. But adjectives can, right? But it has to, like the ending has to match the gender of the noun. So the adjective has the ability to change, but it's gotta go with the noun it's going with. So that's why it has to absolutely be magnus. Okay, good. Really good question. Okay, next. Arbor. We've seen this word before, right, Timjin?
Right.
Okay, let's write down this sentence, shall we? All right. It doesn't follow the rules that we usually see. Okay? It's a little bit of a troublemaker. I don't know what gender this noun is, but if we see it with an adjective, we can figure it out. Okay, arbor est magna. Arbor est magna. So Claire, based on what we know about our patterns and logic, what gender is arbor? If it's being modified by magna, what gender? It's feminine, yeah. And indeed, if you were to look this up in the dictionary, you would get arbor, arboris, feminine, tree. Tree, right? Like Arbor Day or an arboretum. Okay, who'd like to translate that? Arbor est magna.
The tree is big.
The tree is big, yep. Okay. Last but not least, dies. It's kind of a weird word, but we're going to figure out the gender based on what's surrounding it. Okay, and you've actually seen this word on the top of every paper I've ever given you, dies, right? You mean the date, but it usually means day. Okay, so based on the rules of logic that we've just kind of learned, what gender Arwen is dies? Male. Now try to get out of the habit of saying male or female. Say masculine or feminine. Just yeah, it's a little tricky, but okay.
It would be masculine because of the calidus, right?
Yes, because of kalidus. Yeah, that US it confirms it, right? So if we were to look it up, dies, diei, okay? And it is indeed a masculine noun, the word for day.
Oh, I get it now.
Okay, so adjectives are a really good tool to help you remember a noun's gender if you don't remember it, but to kind of help you translate, you should memorize a noun's gender when I give you the vocab lists. Okay, so make sure when you write out a noun, make sure you're writing the gender too. Okay, any questions on that? Does this kind of make sense?
Sure.
Yeah? Sure? Kinda? Sorta? Okay. What I would like...
What's the translation?
Oh yeah, I forgot to do that. Dies est calidus. What does that mean? Oh, you don't remember? All right, Jack.
The day is warm.
The day is warm. Yeah, or the day is hot. I'm going to squeeze it over here because I ran out of room.
Oh wait, hot and warm are interchangeable?
I mean, not...
I thought it was more.
So this textbook is a little wonky. They gave you the translation of calidus as warm,
Yeah.
but none so. It's not... It's technically hot, right? So like if you look at like a hot cup of coffee that you get from a cafe, right? Calde, usually, what does that mean? Like hot, not warm, but hot, like it's a caution. Okay.
What's the word for warm?
I'd imagine it's like tepidus or something like that, right? Like tepid. That's my guess. I don't actually know the word for warm. I forgot. But good question. Okay. But does this kind of make sense now, these patterns?
Yeah,
Okay.
I get it, like the endings of the stuff.
Of the adjectives? Yeah, they can help you identify some nouns. So what I'd like to do to practice this is, do I actually have it? D, yeah! All right, so this is what you're going to be getting. This is in my hand right now. All right, based on the patterns that we know, and if you have to look it up in the glossary, do so. But you're going to identify the genders of these 10 nouns. Okay, there are no neuters here, just masculine or feminine. Okay, and then part 2, there are 15 sentences. All right, and you're going to just mark up and translate like we normally do. Okay, but kind of figure out, like so for each one, give me the gender of the noun adjective pair in the sentence. So for example, in sentence number 1, right, the word davos and solicitus, what gender are those two words? They're masculine, so you're just going to write MASC next to it.
But you don't need to do any translation, right?
You do. You need to mark up, translate, and identify the noun adjective gender. Okay, but I'm only going to have you do, I'm not going to have you do all these. Okay, all right, so,
How many? Like 10?
I don't know, we'll see. Take one, pass it down. Take one, pass it down. Take one, pass it down. All right, so I'm going to stop this recording.